Our guest is John Patterson, state representative, and a bunch of things to go over. But first thing is the pocketbook and the gasoline tax, which has been approved by the House, a smaller version than what the governor had asked for. Right.
Yes, and that came out of the House recently. The governor had asked for an 18 cents a gallon increase effective, essentially October of this year. But the House version whittled that down to a 10.7 cents a gallon increase over the next 2 years. And ODOT
so there's no cost of living built in as he requested?
No, and he had requested the cost of living increase, if you will, but based on the consumer price index. That did not make it in. The legislature strongly feels that increases should be voted on by us in the future. And in part, that's what got us into this mess that we're in. Since 2005, there has not been any kind of adjustment, any increase in the gas tax. Meanwhile, price of construction has gone up in terms of labor, materials themselves, and we have kicked the can down the road, and the governor, DeWine, mentioned that. And worse yet, during the Kasich administration, we bonded the Ohio Turnpike. And that money is now all gone, and the debt service alone on the cumulative bonds that we have out there is like $380 million. So we're paying that debt service before we can even fix a pothole. And so the governor felt that the better way of addressing this, because of inflation, is to increase the fuel tax.
So this would be 10.7 cents over 2 years? So it'd be
over
like
2 years.
A nickel
starting,
something?
It was, 8 cents October 1st, 2019, and then 2.7 cents in the following October.
But initially, this is just going to go to pay down the debt?
Oh, no. It will. Each penny increase actually raises about $68 million. So the debt was going to be, we had to pay that anyway. This is going to be in addition to that, so that we can get back to some road maintenance and some bridge projects that are in dire need. I can tell you as well, and some of the folks will say, well, what about electric vehicles? The House version, keep in mind that this still has to go through the Senate. The House version has a registration fee for electric vehicles at $200 a year. And that figure represents what they would have paid had they been a traditional gas-consuming vehicle. The hybrids, half of that, $100 a year. And the feeling was that up to this point in time, electrics have not been paying any taxes, road taxes, because they never fill up. Also, the CNG is going to be taxed as well.
What's the CNG?
Compressed natural gas.
Oh, okay.
And they have, at this point, because the numbers are so small, they've been a concern, but not until this point have we addressed that, because it just didn't make sense until now. But they, too, will fall under a tax. And I want to share something that's important to Conneaut that Jim Hockaday and I were working on it, a catastrophic snow removal fund. Jim and I had talked last year, probably about this time, about the snowfall that Conneaut received last Christmas. Remember the 3-footer? And the overtime that was involved. And he said, John, there ought to be a way that the state would help out in those instances where we have just a catastrophic snowfall. Well, I was taking notes during the committee hearings, and I saw an opportunity, and I have drafted an amendment that is in the House version right now, that if there's a snowfall amount in an event of 18 inches or more, that the state and local governments will share in that expense up to $100,000 per event per city, should one municipality get hit worse than others, and Conneaut's on that likely
I would think that
hit.
would be, yeah.
But $250,000 a year for 2 years. We'll see if it's renewed in the next budget 2 years from now. But I saw this as an experimental step to help offset those costs when we do have those kinds of snowfalls. And keep in mind that dollars that are spent on snow removal from storms such as the one that we experienced a year ago, that money's coming out of other road funds.
Right.
And so this would be a way, it's a 50-50 split, as I mentioned, and Jim was excited about that. We'll see if it sticks. I hope it does, because there is a need, especially in our neck of the woods, when the lake effect snows pile up and really hamper the local municipality's ability to remove that snow.
How do lawmakers in communities that are not hit by the snowfall so much, how do they usually tend to act on something like this?
Well, this is something brand new, and as such, I had to do some explaining. And obviously, throughout my interaction with them, they understand lake effect snow and how it disproportionately affects us. Now, that's not to say that Columbus or Cincinnati couldn't get hit with an 18-inch storm either. It would help them. So, and that's what I pointed out, that this helps everybody. It's just that with the lake sitting up here, we tend to get more of those kinds of incidents.
But there were some central Ohio storms this year that they got and we didn't get.
That's true. And keep in mind, when Jim and I talked, I said, let's keep the fund relatively small at first so we can get our foot in the door, and then the snowfall amount relatively high. I mean, 18 inches is a significant amount, but we might want to adjust that in the future to 15 to 12 to allow more for a state-local partnership, because even at that, there's quite a bit of snow removal that takes place involving overtime and use of equipment and material. So we'll see where this goes in the Senate right now. When fully phased in, I can tell you that the motor fuel tax will yield approximately $872 million statewide, which is significant, but also keep in mind that the needs are great too. And as
so you got
such,
projects here in this area that you think need?
Oh my goodness, yes. I looked at a map of some of the bridges that need attention, and there are quite a few in Northeast Ohio, and bridges are not cheap.
No.
And in fact, there's one in Cincinnati, the Brent Spence Bridge between Cincinnati and Covington, Kentucky, that is exceedingly expensive. I mean, we're talking about last I thought like $6 billion or something.
Whoa.
Because it's an interstate bridge, multiple lanes, and crossing the Ohio River, the approaches, the exits, that sort of thing. It's very complicated. But it is definitely a major link in that system, and that's why we have not yet fully addressed it. I mean, even paving highways is an expensive proposition. But bridge construction, new bridge construction across the Ohio River, definitely something that is not to be taken lightly, but nonetheless needs to be accomplished.
Heartbeat bill. Can you
Yes,
talk
sir.
about that? Is this something that now the previous governor would not sign it? He said he didn't think that it would stand up legally. The current governor says he'll sign it.
It passed out of the Senate, and there were a number of Republicans who joined the Democrats in voting no for that precise reason. And there were others, Senator Eklund, for example, in Geauga County, represents Geauga and Portage, there felt that because the current bill does not carve out victims of rape or incest, his line of argument was that there are two victims that cannot be overlooked in such a case. So he voted against it. There were 4 Republicans who joined 9 Democrats for those and other reasons. It will be coming to the House. I would suspect that given the composition of the House, it will pass and it will go on to the governor's desk. And it will become a Supreme Court test case, which is what they wanted.
With the makeup of we're talking U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh, U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be challenged, we would assume, in the court, which is what they want. In the meantime, the legal fees are going to be enormous. I mean, you have to factor that in, and I'm not, and I'm sensitive to both sides of the argument, and abortion is a very personal issue. But it will be a long, drawn-out affair, and we'll see where it goes. But the first step is to obviously pass a law that runs counter to accepted provisions of Roe v. Wade, and we'll see where it goes.
John Patterson's my guest, state representative. Similar bills have been struck down by the courts, though, in other states, have they not?
Yes, but the composition, and you hinted at this, the composition of the Supreme Court has changed. It's a more conservative court now, and they may decide to override. And keep in mind that the key component in this whole question is viability. When Roe v. Wade was adjudicated in the early 70s, viability was on a different timetable than what it is now. With the advancements in health care, fetuses are able to be saved, if you will, from stress and such at an earlier date, which changes the whole argument of viability. So I'm just reiterating some of the facts that are out there, and I think it's time that we all have a healthy discussion, a civil discussion, about where we want to go with this, and see where that takes us. It's an emotional issue. It's a highly charged issue.
Yes.
But rational, thoughtful debate, I feel, is always critically important to get us where we need to be as a society, because you have to enter all and entertain, I should say, all components of arguments on both sides to be fair to everybody. And that's what this government's about, fairness.
Right. Switching gears in our last couple of minutes, you'll be out of office in less than 2 years, and Richard Dana has announced that he's running. He's a Geneva School Board member. He's a lawyer, and he is a huge critic of the Ohio General Assembly and school funding. So I saw a picture. Were you at his announcement?
Yes, I was.
Okay, I thought I saw a photo with you in there.
Yes. And I know that Richard has been critical, and keep in mind, I've been part of that legislature fighting for equitable school funding that meets the DeRolf decision. And I can tell you, as we gather here today, it's Monday the 18th. A week from now, Monday the 25th, at 2 o'clock, the first of the televised hearings of the primary-secondary subcommittee deliberations on school funding will take place. It will be live on the Ohio channel.
So that's Channel 25.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can watch it on your computer. Just Google in Ohio
channel. Well, there's a
channel.
sub-channel.
There truly is.
But yeah, like
right.
25.2 or something. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And you can watch the deliberations live. And that's when the Patterson School Group funding plan that meets the DeRolf muster, we feel, will be unveiled publicly and begun to be debated within the confines of that committee. So it is my hope that by the time Mr. Dana is actively campaigning and engaged in the race, that issue has been settled and he can worry about other things, if I've done my job. 30-some
seconds left, though. Along with that is a complaint was how much the state gives to private schools and private education that doesn't have to meet the criteria of the public schools. Is that being taken some consideration there?
Very much so. And the public school superintendents and treasurers who have helped us craft this report contend that they would like to have a direct funding stream right to the private schools, keep it out of the funding that goes to local boards, fund them directly, but with that, insist upon accountability and transparency. I mean, school choice is an argument that the Ohio voters have made consistently. If we're going to fund these public community schools, then they also need to be held to the same high standards as our regular public schools.
John Patterson, State Representative, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.